do is, we do move things around on the bike, but we also really work on form. A lot of times people come in, even if somebody's been riding for however long, 20, 30 years, or they, even pros, will come in, and sometimes they will have, their bike will set up will be pretty well, but their form will be really bad in an area. And whether it's from a repetitive issue, and there might be a weakness in one area of the leg, or some hypothetical thing with their hip flexor or something like that, and it's affecting their pedal stroke, we look at ways to correct that, maybe just from a form perspective. And when we do it, there's a few things that we look at when you ride, as to what may be the cause of an issue. And sometimes, for instance, somebody might have foot pain or foot numbness, and it might not actually be on the foot, it might be something that's occurring on the hands or in the upper back. And so when we do that, when we go through the fit, these are all factors that we look at. And we break it down for the rider so that they, your body's really stupid and your brain's really smart. So we gotta identify what those issues are so that your brain can compute it while you're riding, and really, really make it simple. And when we go through the process, it's like you come in, you do our first fit. That's not your ideal setup. We usually have a follow-up or two after that to get you into the right place, because your body has to learn new mechanics, and we have to make sure you train into that correctly. If I were to dump you into an ideal position day one, you would probably kill the foundation of everything on a bike. People will say that to you, but to actually understand what that is, it's kind of hard to really get it. So one thing we really look at is how the saddle interacts with the hip. And when people sit on this is like road and mountain too, so or gravel, it's all applicable to whatever bike you ride. The only thing that changes is your hip rotation and some of the equipment underneath you. But the whole hip foundation and everything else is all the same no matter, there's some variations for it depending on the bike, but it's all consistent across all bikes. So when we start to look at it, we are looking at the initial setup of the bike, but we're really looking at the posture. So go ahead and start feeling. Melissa already kind of knows how to ride a bike, so she's kind of cheat. So when we do it, let's just do posture first. So here's one that we see a lot of is posture one. You can probably move over to the side or over there or whatever. But so this is very common with pelvis rotated aft or posterior. We see a lot of curvature in the spine. There's typically a lot of weight on the hands. They don't really actually sit in the saddle very well here. So scoot forward on the saddle. So in this position, Melissa here is pretty round. You can see when she's pedaling, her pedal stroke is really kind of blocky. She's rocking her hips a lot. There's usually a lot of pressure in the upper back area, lower neck. And you're doing a lot of stabilization with the shoulders in this position. So when we see somebody come in riding like this, whether it's a mountain bike or road bike or gravel bike, first thing we want to do is really try to change the posture. Really before we start to move too many things around on the bike, because when we change the posture, it's going to affect leg angle and extension and stuff like that. The next one is hips are rotated really, really far forward. This is a little bit more uncommon. Sometimes we see it in women more than men. Scoot forward too. So here we have still a ton of stabilization in the shoulders. Still rock around a lot on the saddle. Yeah.
Huh.
Feel it in your back. A lot of pressure on the feet still. Usually on this position, it's not super sustainable. Well, it's not very sustainable at all because there's a lot of pressure on the soft tissue. This type of rider doesn't really sit on bone. They sit on soft tissue, which is what you don't want to do. The next one is a little bit more ideal. So this is where our pelvis is rotated more neutral. We're sitting on our ischium, which is part of your hip. So if you were to, since you're sitting down right now, put your hand on your butt, you can feel your sit bones. Those are your tuberosities, tuberosities. We actually don't ever sit on those on a bike. Most people try to sit on those, like you do on a chair. That is typically not very good. What we do is we sit farther forward, where, I'll show you a picture of the pelvis, where you actually sit on the bone structure in your hip that saddles are designed for you to sit on. So if you look at the most saddle shapes, they kind of line up with how the pelvis is underneath, or functionally they'll work that way better, even if they're not designed for it. And most of the modern saddles or options that are available, depending on the company you're looking at, work pretty well. Yeah, once we kind of get you in the right position, then we can really start to make adjustments to the bike and actually make really accurate equipment choices. So when we put something on a bike, there's not like, oh, you're going to ride this for 30 days and see how it is and tell me, and if it doesn't feel that good, we'll try something else. Usually 95% of the time we can get the right equipment right off the bat, and there is no like gray area. It works or it doesn't work, and we can see that pretty quickly in here. There might be a few things based on your hip settling into position and dialing in the front of a bike, but we know that during the time in the process, as we're going through the process. So there is no like, this is going to be uncomfortable for 200, however long, and then it'll get comfortable. It's like, this is going to work right away. So if you look at the hip here, so those are your tuberosities right there. And we actually sit further forward on that flatter part of the hip ischium, the ischium underneath. It's kind of look like, so if your tuberosities are these guys, you're sitting more on this flatter part. So when you sit there and you actually contact the saddle, saddles go from being very, like when you sit on bone, it feels very acute. If you sit on it with your tuberosities, acute pressure, to much more, the pressure is spread out over the hip a lot better. And the firmness is a lot more sustainable. Well, it is sustainable, it doesn't affect you quite the same. Forward of that is your pubic symphysis. That's the area where we don't want to touch on the saddle. Because if we do, you're going to not sit on the saddle and you're going to want to kill somebody.
Where's that on the diagram? The pubic symphysis?
Pubic symphysis is right up front.
That's very front.
That's where all the stuff is. And that's where like blood flow goes. That's the area where we just don't stick away from. Then when we look at saddles, typically if somebody's like, I hate firm saddles and we're riding a really soft saddle, then we can actually have a conversation about saddles, because you'll go, oh, feels really good. Typically a really soft jelly saddle will not work, because what happens is your bones sit in the saddle, and then you have the rest of the saddle that's really soft on soft tissue, and it's a bad day.